right, welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're diving into a story that you might think you know the story behind the Star-Spangled Banner.
Oh, yeah.
But trust me, there's more to this anthem than meets the eye.
Absolutely.
Did you know that it was inspired by a real battle, like during a war that almost tore America apart?
It's true.
So we're going to uncover, the human drama, the strategic brilliance, and maybe even some surprising facts that you never knew. And all thanks to this fascinating new article from the Department of Defense. It was released this week in honor of National Anthem Day on March 3rd.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So what's often overlooked is that this song, now a symbol of unity, emerged from a period of intense division and uncertainty in America's early history.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize just how divided the country was at that time. It wasn't some kind of unified front.
Yeah.
There were a lot of different opinions on, whether or not this war was even a good idea.
Okay, so let's rewind the clock. It's 1812, and America, barely a teenager in nation years, is squaring off against Great Britain. Again. So what was the big deal this time? Wasn't one revolution enough?
Well, this wasn't just about taxes and tea anymore. It was about America proving it could stand on its own, that the revolution wasn't a fluke.
Right.
Britain, having just defeated Napoleon in Europe, thought they could easily reassert their dominance over the U.S. They wanted to control trade and shipping. They wanted to, keep America under their thumb.
And they weren't messing around. I mean, they burned down Washington, D.C.
Right.
Not just a few buildings,
Yeah.
the White House, the Capitol building, everything. Why go so scorched earth?
It was a bold, almost ruthless move. The British knew that capturing Washington wouldn't win the war, but it would deliver a devastating psychological blow.
Right.
It was meant to be this message, we can reach you anywhere, anytime, but it backfired spectacularly.
Oh, I bet that lit a fire under the Americans, though.
Yeah, you could say that. The burning of Washington galvanized American resistance. And it also made the British overconfident.
Oh.
They thought Baltimore would be an easy next target. But they underestimated the resolve of the Americans, particularly at a place called Fort McHenry.
Ah, Fort McHenry, defender of Baltimore Harbor. And I have heard it's shaped like a star.
Yes, a 5-pointed star designed to withstand attacks from all sides.
Oh, wow.
Major George Armistead commanded about 1,000 men inside, armed with cannons and fierce determination to protect their city.
Now, this is where Francis Scott Key enters the scene, right? The lawyer who wrote the anthem?
Exactly. But Key wasn't at Fort McHenry to fight. He was there on a delicate mission. He was trying to negotiate the release of an American doctor held prisoner by the British.
Oh, wow.
Talk about being caught in the crossfire.
So how did he end up witnessing the bombardment? Did he get a VIP ticket to the show?
Not quite. He was actually detained on a British truce vessel during the attack. Imagine his situation, stuck on an enemy ship with a front row seat to this massive bombardment.
Oh my gosh.
He could see the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air.
Wow, he actually used those words in the anthem. I always thought that was just poetic license.
Not at all. Key was describing what he saw and felt. That firsthand experience is what gives the anthem its raw power.
So this wasn't some guy sitting in a cozy study coming up with rhymes. He was right there in the thick of it.
Absolutely. For 25 straight hours, he watched as the British fleet unleashed everything they had on Fort McHenry.
Wow.
And he was powerless to do anything but watch.
I can't even imagine the anxiety, the tension.
Well, think about it. Here's a young nation fighting for its survival, and Key is witnessing this pivotal moment. That could decide the fate of Baltimore, maybe even the entire war. This wasn't just about one fort, it was about the future of America.
So here's Key watching this relentless attack bombs exploding the fort, shrouded in smoke. I mean, he must have thought it was a lost cause.
Yeah, he certainly had reason to worry. The scale of the bombardment was unprecedented. The British were using these new Congreve rockets, these terrifying projectiles that would just light up the night sky. It was a brutal display of firepower.
But Fort McHenry was built to take a beating, right?
It was. But even the most robust defenses have their limits. What's really remarkable is how the Americans adapted. They used this tactic called hot shot heating cannonballs until they were red hot, hoping to ignite British ships.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a desperate but ingenious strategy.
So it wasn't just about enduring the attack. They were actively fighting back, coming up with creative solutions on the fly.
Exactly. And let's not forget the human cost. Both sides suffered casualties. Imagine the courage of those men standing their ground under such intense fire.
And what about the people of Baltimore? What was their experience like during the attack?
Well, Baltimore was in a state of panic. Many residents fled the city fearing the worst. those who remained huddled in their homes, listening to the earth-shattering explosions, not knowing if their city would survive the night.
That's a side of the story we don't often hear. It wasn't just a military engagement, it was a terrifying ordeal for ordinary people caught in the middle of a war.
Absolutely, and it's worth remembering that the flag Key saw waving over Fort McHenry wasn't just any flag.
Right.
It was enormous, 30 by 42 feet, specially commissioned by Major Armistead to be this symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope visible for miles.
Wait, there's more to the flag than just its size. I thought it was just a standard American flag.
It was the standard design for the time, 15 stars and stripes representing the original states. But the sheer scale of this flag made it extraordinary. And it was sewn by Mary Pickersgill and her team of seamstresses.
Oh, wow. So Mary Pickersgill, this local seamstress, played a crucial role in this story.
She did. Imagine her working day and night with her daughter and several other women to create this massive flag. It took weeks to sew using yards and yards of fabric. They even had to rent space at a local brewery because their homes weren't big enough.
That's amazing. It adds a whole new layer to the story, these unsung heroes behind the scenes.
And it reminds us that even in the midst of war, ordinary people can contribute to extraordinary events. Sometimes it's the smallest acts of courage and determination that make the biggest difference.
Okay, so the bombardment stops, the smoke clears, and there's the flag still flying. What was Key's reaction?
Relief, astonishment, and a surge of patriotic pride, I imagine.
Yeah.
He described it as a most magnificent spectacle. The sight of that flag still waving after such a brutal attack must have been incredibly moving. You know, it symbolized the resilience of the fort, the spirit of the American people, and the hope for a brighter future.
And that moment, that image, became the catalyst for the Star-Spangled Banner.
It was the spark that ignited his imagination. He scribbled down the first verses of his poem, Defense of Fort McHenry, while still on that British ship. He couldn't have known that it would become one of the most recognizable anthems in the world.
So the battle ends. Key writes his poem case closed right.
Well, the Battle of Fort McHenry was a turning point, a victory for the Americans. But the war itself was far from over.
Right. I remember reading that the War of 1812 was actually quite controversial, even in America. Why was that?
Well, there were deep divisions within the country. Some, particularly in the Northeast, opposed the war. They saw it as unnecessary, harmful to their trade with Britain, and some even saw it as this land grab for territory in Canada.
So even while fighting for independence, America was grappling with internal conflicts and differing views on the war's purpose.
Exactly. It wasn't a simple case of us versus them. You know, there were these complex political and economic factors at play, as well as these regional differences that fueled these debates.
Yeah, it's fascinating how even during times of conflict, there's often this internal disagreement about the path forward. It makes you realize history isn't just, this neat narrative. It's a messy tangle of perspectives.
Precisely. And the War of 1812 is a prime example of that. It ultimately ended in a stalemate with no clear victor. But it had a profound impact on the young nation's identity.
It's like going through a trial by fire. You come out the other side changed, even if you haven't gained everything you fought for.
Exactly. The War of 1812 solidified America's resolve, its sense of independence, and, it showed the world that they wouldn't back down from a challenge. And within that story, the Star-Spangled Banner emerges as this potent symbol of resilience and hope.
It's interesting how the song itself, with its, soaring melodies and these dramatic lyrics, it seems to capture those emotions perfectly. But I'll admit, some of the wording is a bit tough to decipher.
Yeah, that's a common observation. It's not your average pop song lyric. Key used this elevated, almost Shakespearean language, filled with imagery that was powerful for its time, but perhaps a little less accessible today.
And some people find the focus on war and military victory a bit problematic, especially in our modern context.
That's a valid point. It's important to remember that the Star-Spangled Banner is a product of its time, reflecting the values and anxieties of a nation literally fighting for its existence. But it's also a piece of art that continues to evolve in meaning as we do.
So how should we approach it today? Should we sing it with blind patriotism, or should we critically examine its message?
I think the best approach is one of informed appreciation. Understanding the historical context, both the triumphs and the complexities, allows us to engage with the anthem on a deeper level. We can appreciate its power, its emotional resonance, while acknowledging that its message might be interpreted differently today.
It's like viewing a historical painting. We can admire the artistry and the craftsmanship while understanding that the subject matter might reflect attitudes and beliefs that have evolved over time.
Exactly, and that's what makes exploring history so rewarding. It's not just about memorizing facts. It's about grappling with the nuances, the contradictions, and ultimately finding connections to our own lives and experiences.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the story behind the Star-Spangled Banner, what stands out to you as the most important takeaway?
For me, it's the realization that this anthem, born out of conflict and uncertainty, has transcended its origins to become a symbol of something much larger. It speaks to the human spirit's ability to find hope and unity, even in the darkest of times.
That's a beautiful sentiment. And it reminds us that we're all part of this continuum connected to the struggles and triumphs of those who came before us.
And that their stories, like the story of Fort McHenry and the Star-Spangled Banner, can inspire us to face our own challenges with courage, resilience, and a belief in a brighter future.
Beautifully said. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. And to our listeners, we hope you've gained a new perspective on this iconic anthem. And what does the Star-Spangled Banner mean to you now? Share your thoughts with us on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep exploring and keep asking questions.